I hope there's plenty of space on there. Oops. Okay, so snow. Brr, it's all cold outside and we're gonna paint snow. Just to remind us of how cold it really is. Okay, so this scene, this painting was from when I was in Rye, Colorado. But a lot of these are kind of universal, and we can see places and trees and images similar to this everywhere. All right, so we still have a lot of questions about color temperature, warm and cool, and how to recognize the difference between them. So in this painting, what would you consider the warm colors and what would you call the cool colors?
Cool blue and warm lavender.
Okay, so there we go. Cool blue and warm lavender. That's an interesting choice for there. Who else?
Warm pink and cool blue, and I'm not sure what white would be.
Okay. What do you
I think the
think?
lavender's kind of cool myself.
All right, and what would you consider the warm?
Oh, I
areas
see
of the
like
painting?
a little, I don't want to say yellow on the snow.
Yeah, no animals are involved in the making of this picture.
Right. And I see some warm up on the rocks and maybe in that bush that's there by the house.
And the
in the
sky,
house.
the sky a little bit, like some yellows behind the trees. I don't know if I'm just seeing things.
Okay, so what you have done is identify how warm and cool are relative. When you were talking about cool blues and warm lavenders, well, the lavenders compared to the yellows, the lavenders would then be cool compared to the warm yellows, but the lavenders in there compared to the blues are warm. So it really is relative. So when you say that you're struggling to know what's warm and cool, that's why. It depends on what you're comparing it to. So comparing the lavender to the yellow, the lavender becomes cooler. Comparing the lavender to the lavender is warmer. So really the lavender is warmer than the blue because it's tending towards the reds. You've added reds to it, and the red is warm in art. So the same thing with the yellow. Yellow is it's the color of the sun, warmth. That's what we associate when we talk about warm.
Would green be cool then?
Green is more cool, but it can be within greens. Within greens, you can say you have warmer greens and cooler greens.
Okay.
So the greens, the more they tend towards the orange-red side of things, the warmer they're going to be. The more they tend towards the blue side of the spectrum, the cooler they're going to be, relatively speaking. The reason why it's important to be able to distinguish in our own paintings between warm and cool is because when something doesn't feel like it's working right in our painting, if we start getting a muddy look to it, it's generally because our color temperatures are fighting against each other. We're using the wrong color temperature in an area. Like we might have an overcast day where the light is more on the cool side, which makes our shadows more on the warm side, generally speaking. So if we take our shadows and put in a blue shadow, that's a cool shadow, then generally it's going to start to feel, it's not going to feel natural. And that's, if we don't know what's going on in the painting, we'll be fighting with it constantly and never satisfied with it.
Would that be considered an overcast day?
Yes. So my shadows are warm. If you look at the trees and other areas. Now, and even on the snow, like from the small little trees and things, when it casts a shadow, it's not as blue as it might be on a bright sunny day. They're more of the lavenders instead of so the lavenders are warmer on the snow than a blue shadow might be. So there we go into the relativity of warm and cool. But then the snow itself, with all the light in there, we also have a lot of the yellows because it's kind of, even though it's overcast, this is more of an evening, and so the sun is creating that yellow cast to everything, to the haziness of the sky. That's warming up the light. So this one is kind of one of those where it's not a strong warm and cool on either side, as far as the sky isn't a definite, this is a cool sky kind of situation. It's getting cooler too, because we're kind of at that point where it's not really sunset yet, but it's also not, it's later in the day, and it's an overcast day, so it's kind of a muddled middle there a bit. And that's where I play with the shadows and the color temperatures to make sure that they feel right.
Okay, so on an overcast day, your lavenders, you put lavenders in to make the shadows warmer? Is that what you are saying?
When you talk about, there's no this is the way to do it every time scenario. It's all relative. So let me demonstrate a little bit here. Let's get, what's that? What's
recording?
Yes. Are you worried about your questions? No. No. It's good to have those questions. Oftentimes they don't come through. I wish I had some kind of a way of, like, we probably need to put a mic in the middle of the room or something so everybody can hear your questions. Even though you're a little hesitant on that. You don't want this to go down for posterity, eh? But it's helpful, and I can't sit here through these and repeat all the questions. You're the ones that are paying for the class, so this is for your benefit. It's helpful to everybody that's going to get to see this on YouTube, but it also might help if you could hear your questions later, so you knew what you were asking and what it was that I was responding to. But all of that, there's only so much time in here, so we can't get it all down correctly yet. At least I haven't figured it all out quite yet. Okay, this brush I wasn't going to use, but since we're doing snow and it was already full of white, a whitish color, I figure I'll just clean it up a little bit and use it. Okay, so I won't be able to get as expressive with the small one as I did with the big one. That painting, that original painting, was about a 40 by 50 or somewhere around that size, 36 by 50, something like that. Yeah, even it was longer, but about that height. So it was a big piece, it was a big painting. So I can't get all the movement and subtleties and things that I had in that painting, but we can at least demonstrate some of the ways that shadow, color temperature affects shadows and things in snow, and play with highlights and that sort of thing, how the light plays on snow. Okay, so I'll start with, we'll do that same kind of a warm sky up there, and I'm gonna go right for the value. So I'm going to start with white, which I don't often do. Because I like to use
what is that, lemon you added to it?
a cad yellow medium and a little bit of cad lemon. And then part of what I do with that sky too is there's a real light cerulean, in this case manganese, in there as well. So I'll put this down and then add a little bit of spots of light blue into it. Yeah, definitely find a seat where you can see what's going on.
Do I have a big pen? Do you want it?
No, not at all. All right, and we have a lot more snow and just a small little sky up here that I'll be putting in. Okay, so we get that and then a little bit of this manganese. Manganese, yes. All right, and then in this particular case, we have a bank of trees and bushes that are dark, and a lot of lavenders and things in that bank of trees. So we've got ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and then I'll be adding in probably some transparent oxide red as well as we go. But because it's winter and all that, I'm going to be staying more on the lavender side.
So you added what to it? Red? Crimson?
Ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and a little transparent oxide red. There. There we go.
So that is lavender?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a lavender. And this will also play well down with the shadows we'll have down in the snow. Okay, so part of what I'm doing here is setting up the backdrop of trees where you have some that are off a little bit farther into the distance and others that are closer to us. So I'm getting the preliminary backdrop of lighter color up here that can help push back and create the illusion of trees in the distance. And then I'll come in with some darker trees on top of that. And there are a lot of little highlight subtleties and all that that I won't be able to address very well today because we just won't have enough time for that. Okay, so we've got some of that more established. Come in here. And remember, back in here too, I want to leave little areas where it feels like snow has gotten back in there too. Some of that I can come back in and add in afterwards as we play with it, but that's sort of some of the things that we're thinking about as we go. All right, let's see.
Now, the pressure of your strokes, is it light most of the time?
It varies. When I first place it down, it'll probably be a kind of a heavy stroke, and then as I release, I'm lightening it up. And then other times I'm feathering it just like a dry brush effect over the top of the other colors so that I don't dig down into the previous color and lift it off the panel.
What size is that brush?
This brush is an 8. And then the bigger ones that I use here are 10s and 12s, but those vary between manufacturers as well. Like I had the Dick Blick Master Series. They're dinky little things. If it says a 16, it's like a size 8 in reality. So I don't know why they do that. It seems just dumb to me.
Part of my problem
It should be uniform across manufacturers.
might be I don't use wide enough brushes. I have I'm not getting those wider strokes like that.
Yeah,
I feel like you lose control when your brush gets that big. I have a
I
fear.
haven't ever really tried brushes that big.
I can't.
I might go out and get some.
I had somebody that emailed me. She's a classical painter, and she does portraiture, and she uses small brushes, and those can be great for doing certain types of realism. But even when I do realism now, like with the flowers that we did, they feel real, they feel natural. You can see that I start off with very big brushes. And it doesn't mean that you can't use small brushes. They can be very handy. But to a great extent, I can get most of the effects that I get, even with small highlights on the side of a flower petal, with a big brush. But you want to have a brush that you can get a nice, clean, crisp edge to it. So if your brushes are all frayed out and frazzled, and you're not going to have the control with those. These are bristle brushes. So like hog bristles.
Sprayed out brushes away.
Depends on what
Unless we want them.
what technique. Yeah, you don't have to throw out those brushes. Like Ken Oster, he uses brushes that are down to the little nub and all the paint is dried in them and all that. But he does a very fast, different type of style. And so his studio is a mess. He has paint everywhere. It's just, and that's the way he is even on location. He paints, but his work turns out great. It's beautiful. He has learned what his tools and materials will do for him. It's with every artist, you kind of will gravitate to those things that work well for you and what you're trying to achieve with your particular work. So there isn't yes, you definitely have to throw out those brushes. That's just, no. You just have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So the big brushes, when I use small brushes, especially in the beginning, it tends to cause my work to become stiff and lifeless. And if I stick with bigger brushes as long as possible, then I tend to be more fluid with everything, with my thinking, with my painting. And then as I go, if I need to get to some smaller brushes eventually, at least I have the feeling already established, so the little brushes don't become as constrictive then.
What brand do you?
All kinds of different ones. Robert Simmons, Grumbacher, Utrecht. And I bought a bunch of Utrecht brushes, different styles, like a 209, what's this one, 207 I think. Oh, the numbers are missing on that one. Let's see. On here, yes. 207, and I get flats. I used to get rounds and brights, but I like flats now because I like to have that edge, that really sharp edge I can get in those corners. That's how I can get some of the little highlight edges and all that.
Brushes.
Online, yep.
Robert Simmons, they used to sell that at Hobby Lobby, and I don't think they have been carrying his brand anymore.
Oh, they might not. But these Utrecht brushes are inexpensive, and I've been using this group of them right now for at least 4 or 5 years now, and they've held up superbly.
Okay.
Much of that, I think, comes because I use the terpenoid naturals, and it tends to keep them, it's like it keeps an oil in there so they don't get all frayed as quickly. But also, it's part of it is the way I clean them, and I'm always pulling, as I clean my brush or pull paint out of it, I'm putting a lot of pressure on and pulling the brush through. I'm not pulling the towel on it, I'm pulling the brush out of it, and it maintains that sharp edge
The walnut
on the bristle. Oh yeah, walnut oil is really good for the brushes too.
I think the soap that I use, even though it's supposed to be a good soap for washing brushes, I think that damages the brushes as much as I do.
It might, I don't know, it would depend on the soap, I guess. And then you had a tendency to rub your brush sideways like this, and that really disrupts the bristles. It tends to fray the bristles themselves, whereas I'm more of a up and down, and then using the edge like this, but not going this way. If I'm going to go this way with something, I'm going to do it like with the whole brush, not the side of the brush, or the yeah, how do you describe, I mean, not the edge side of the brush. So figuring out those things on how to preserve your brushes a little bit can be helpful. But then you have someone, I think Clyde Aspevig said he goes through boxes. He just buys boxes of brushes and throws them away. I mean, you just go through them so quick. Other people, they like to buy brushes that are, I mean, some of my watercolor brushes are like $200-300 a piece. And I don't do much with watercolor anymore, but the brushes can be really expensive. And yet, when I was doing watercolor, I found that I could use bristle brushes for my oil painting, for my watercolors, and get some really great spontaneous effects with them. And sometimes those tools, the expense of them is worth it, and other times it's overkill and completely unnecessary. It just, really it comes down to painting every day, and you'll get to know what your tools can do for you. Brushes though, overall, these 207s and 209 series, they've held up really well, and they're not expensive at all.
Did you track?
Yes. Oh, 203, 209, and 207. That's the series. And all of them have worked out beautifully.
A U or a U?
Now you can see like this brush though, it is starting to fray out a little bit in some of it. But as long as I'm not doing too careful of detail work, it's working out well. But then overall, most of the others are not fraying out, and like with the Robert Simmons, I had brushes that some worked out really well, others didn't. They'd get all twisted and distorted. And then some of my old, like this Grumbacher, I think it's probably 30 years old. And some of the old Grumbacher brushes were phenomenal. They were put together so well, they lasted forever. They don't make them like that anymore. Okay. So then, snow. You can see in there that for the most part there's not a lot of white snow. White in terms of it looks like light is on it, it's white. And most of it is in shadow. So we start off that way. Sorry. All right. We're gonna do that. Get a little bit of shadow going with our snow here. So I'm just taking, like just now I took a little bit of the phthalo blue and alizarin crimson. So I want to make sure that, remember, yeah, we're dealing with snow. That doesn't mean that it is white or bright, or you can still have some fairly deep shadow work going on with snow. Not as much as you would with something else, because there is, for the most part, light is constantly refracting through all those little crystals of snow. But it can get much darker than, in fact, that's not even. Okay, so now I'm adding a little bit of ultramarine blue and some more alizarin crimson to deepen that shadow more, because that was not nearly dark enough.
Ultramarine blue and what?
Alizarin crimson. Yeah, it's just making a violet color.
My one painting I got it too royal blue, and I've had several comments, people thinking it's water,
Oh, is that right?
so I need to.
You gotta turn it in water.
A lot of that,
No, I need to change it. Yeah.
a lot of that might come about just in the way that it's not necessarily the color, but the play of light on it and the flow of the land and structure and that sort of thing.
But the sky's violet, so it should reflect on the snow.
Oh, okay.
And the sky's not royal blue, so I need to make those match.
So you can see here, these, I'm getting that fairly dark, overall for snow.
But how did you get the little white through it, through the purple?
The white?
Yeah, I see white.
You mean all the bits of white in here? That's just the texture of my board. And then I dry brush over. I don't push through enough to get a smooth, uniform color application all the way through. I like dry brushing constantly and letting the panel and the colors underneath. Like, where I don't have enough paint on my brush to lay down a thick layer of paint everywhere. So when I drag the brush across here, it's pulling the paint off little by little bits at a time and not in big globs. Like if I had enough paint on here that I could lay it on like that, see, that would cover up everything, putting it on thicker. So I'm letting it drag the paint off as it goes across the board without pushing it into all the texture of the panel. That makes sense?
That answers one of your questions.
Yeah,
Now, it makes sense.
the way to make a stroke. Different kinds of strokes. Or different colors.
That's right.
Couldn't help myself.
Okay, so I'm going to create a path through that snow so you can see what happens with that. And so when we have little paths and stuff in the snow, especially out in nature, oftentimes it's because the animals have walked there and the snow has melted more because it's closer, the ground and the sun come closer to each other rather than all that snow insulating it. So you get a mixture of mud and grass and other things going on in there. So don't worry about making a little path all nice and clean and neat looking. You can put all kinds of colors into a path. Not sure how much I want to put in there yet. And then same thing in other areas of the snow I might add in just so it doesn't become too pristine and pretty looking. And that's not very accurate. Just to get variation in the scene, I guess. All right, then let's put in a couple of rocks and things that we can use to lay the snow down over the top of.
A couple of paintings where I've used rocks, they're too exact or something, too much like each other or something.
Yeah, we don't want it to look man-made, as if somebody went out there and placed the rocks in some kind of a...
Too much. So I stopped painting rocks then.
Alrighty. Now
I don't remember if I don't take pictures.
That's all right. Hopefully this video will turn out. I don't know what's going on with that previous one, all the error messages, but we'll get that figured out. I'll get it figured out somehow. We'll get it turned into a video. I'm not techie enough to know what's going on with that software. Okay, so we've got, and then of course I look into my mirror always to check things. Okay, so now the color of the sky, we're going to get some of that going down into the snow. And I could have probably done more of that earlier, but... And notice I'm grabbing a nice big brush. So this one is a 10. Although it looks
It's Robert Simmons.
big. This is Utrecht.
Oh.
This is Utrecht Series 203. Flat.
Robert Simmons used to date that collar
Me
handle.
too, it did.
They are. Yeah, you're right. This is the color of those in there are Robert Simmons. But those have all been worn down to where they're now rounds instead of flat, or brights instead of flats. All right. So we'll place some warmth in here. And this is where I play with it a bit. When I put my first stroke down, I will just lay it on there with some heavy paint so that it doesn't pick up any of the colors underneath. And then if I want to get the snow so that it's reflecting some of the things around it, like where the rocks are, and that I'll pick up a little bit of those colors and pull them into it some. But then I have to clean my brush off before I go to the next bit of snow, because I don't want those colors to adulterate the rest of the snow that I put down. And then after I get some of that laid in, well, then I can come back with some other colors again and play with that a bit to change up the coloration. But in the beginning, this part especially, I want to keep fairly clean. Now in the original painting, there were reasons for all the shadows that we have in there. And this one, it's not going to be as obvious. You know, we had that big pine tree, the house, and the little bushes. So in this one, we'll be making up the shadows as if they're trees somewhere or something causing those shadows in there. All right, let's see. And then I don't have to put, I mean, like this light color, what we can do with this is use it as kind of vehicles to lead the eye around. A combination of the shadow ones moving us around. And then these. So if we want, say, the center of interest to be this direction, we can use some of this light to kind of point somebody back that direction and still leave a lot of the shadow areas in there.
Maybe that's another thing I have a weak spot for, leading the eye around.
Me too.
You have a tendency to use, oops, I keep hitting the, that's itching my neck and I keep hitting it. I forget it's the microphone. There's probably going to be some scratchy noises on there.
Right. Do you think about it, Gene?
What's that?
Lead the eye? I mean, I don't think about it.
A little bit, not enough, not as much as I should. But I know that you don't want to zing them right off the side of the
I know I
canvas.
need to think about it.
And a lot of that is it's very subjective. So there's no one that can say, yes, this one is definitely the way to do it, and then do that every time. Otherwise, painting would get pretty boring. Those are starting to hurt my fingers again. I always forget.
Scissors hand every time I see you with that.
5 or 6 brushes at a time in my fingers. Okay. So a lot of what we talk about when we say leading the viewer around and all that, those are the same as what we were talking about with color temperature. It's very relative and subjective. Much of that comes down to the artist. So one artist might take a barn and put it in and make it very small and make everything relative to that small scene that way. Other artists like to take up the whole picture with the barn. And the barn becomes the center of activity in there. Same thing with when we're doing anything with this. Some person might go and put in mostly the bright, warm yellow snow with just a few little shadow areas in there. There's not anything to say this is the way to do it and that's not. So, and some of this I kind of make up as I go along. I might have a general idea when I start, but I also let the picture kind of dictate a lot where I end up with it. If something happens in here when I'm painting, especially because the beginning is so fluid and spontaneous, if something happens in there and I think, you know, that's kind of nice, I'm not going to say, but that's not according to my plan, so forget it. It's gone. That's not, that would be a waste. I just keep myself open to happy accidents or seeing what might be possible in there other than what I originally planned. But it is helpful to have a good plan to begin with. Kind of see in our mind the overall key or the type of light that we're going to have throughout the painting, the direction of the light, what we want to focus on in our subject. When we first looked at the subject, whether it's a landscape or still life or whatever, what was it that stood out to us in that first moment? What was our first impression of the area? And then focus on that as much as we can. Because otherwise we'll get so bombarded with all this detail everywhere that we lose sight of the initial impression or simplicity of the scene that dominated our interest to begin with. Okay, let me get a few of these trees. So we can come in and create a tree here and there so that they, oops, don't want that Y effect there.
So are you just actually picking up paint from the painting? Putting that tree in?
Here and there, yes. It's a combination of the original paint that I got, and then as I use it up, then I'm picking up paint here and there. But also, I want some that are much stronger and others that kind of fade away. And this is where the tendency would be often, especially with, and I can have the same tendency with students, is to make these trees much bigger. And we have a tendency to make things bigger than they should be relative to the scene that we're creating. And they become too heavy, too domineering in the piece. Whereas it'll feel much more intimate, and especially in this small scene, since it's a 9 by 12, to create trees that are smaller, it makes the snow scene here much bigger than it is if the trees are smaller, because these trees will give the relativity of size relationships. So we're going to say that these trees are still good sized trees. So if they're small to us, that means that they're at a little bit of a distance, and this snow is bigger than what it might be. So if we made these trees the width of this and coming down here, then suddenly it shrinks that scene. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm doing when I'm thinking about my trees and what size to make them. Part of that tree is too big for where I want it to be. So some of this, I want some of these trees to feel I don't necessarily want these dark trees to go all the way across, because I don't know that I want to pull that strong of a contrast on this side of it. If I need to later, I'll do that, but right now that's why I'm keeping the darker, stronger trees on this side, so it still keeps us kind of here in this area of the painting. So this could, when you were talking about people thought it was water, this could start to feel like a stream to people as well. And yeah, you can never tell with snow and with scenes. And we don't necessarily have to say that it's not either. If people see something that we didn't actually think was there, that's just fine. Let everybody use their imagination and see what they see when they look at it. Now, if it's just because we don't know what on earth we're doing and nobody can figure out what it is, then we might have a problem. But if it's still beautiful and it's enjoyable, then who really cares if somebody sees exactly what we intended? It doesn't matter. All right. So does this feel like a snow scene so far? With just the few things that we've done? And yet we have all these different colors involved with this snow. This lavender color here is more red. This one's a little bit more on the blue side. You know, there's a lot of different colors involved already, and yet it still feels like snow. And that's the point to this exercise, is to let you see that snow is not white. Snow is all kinds of different colors, depending on the sky, depending on the foliage and other bits of nature that are around it. Whatever is the rocks, everything can influence the color of the snow. So, some of these rocks, if we wanted to turn them into, so our light is basically coming, it's almost like a, I don't know, where do I have my, I need to create some shadows. So in my original painting, the light is kind of coming from this direction, from the left side and going up a little bit. And the way that we can tell that is by, okay, I was going to use a smaller brush, but I'll show you how we can do this with whatever size brush we've got. How about that? So I'm going to put in a little dinky tree, just so that we can create some shadows, and you can see how we do that. And I'm going to do it with this big old monster brush. Although this was used for snow, maybe should I get a different monster brush? Yeah. Just so we have a clean one here. Actually, so I don't dirty up my snow brush. Okay, so I'm just gonna make a small little kind of twig tree sticking out. And what I do when I push my brush through the paint, I'm not mushing up the top edge of the brush. I'm making sure that I keep it flat as I push it through, so that it's grabbing paint onto the look at all those bristles coming out of there. So that I'm getting paint on the edge, but still maintaining the edge of the brush, or crispness of the edge of the brush. All right, so now I can take that big old, what is that, size 10, and create a little tree in here. So this is what I mean by you don't have to, these big brushes are universal in their application of paint. You can make small and big, that more on the brown side. In fact, I'm going to change that up a bit. There we go. And I don't like to overmix the paint either, because it's much more fun if you have an ununiform mix in there. Okay, so where do I want to have a twig? Maybe down in here. And we'll create a couple little branches coming off. Maybe a little bevy of branches in here. Little twiggy trees. Just so we can show you how to do shadows and that sort of thing. So you can do those little things with a big brush or a little brush. Just have to have that sharp edge.
And then light touch.
Yeah, that's where holding it back and kind of just getting enough paint on there that you don't have to force the brush into it. When you force the brush, that's when you spread the bristles and you no longer have an edge on your brush. So just dragging the brush lightly down, you can do anything with it.
So you recommend starting at the top so that if you end up applying too much pressure, it gets wider at the bottom?
No doubt about that. Starting at the top with the thinner, and then as you get down, and sometimes I do that purposefully. As I come down to the bottom, I put a little bit more pressure to spread those bristles and get a wider bottom on it. So yeah, that's where painting every day and learning what your tools are capable of is very helpful.
I noticed too, you're painting from your shoulder, not from your...
Oh yeah. Yeah, none of this sort of thing with the wrist. Your arm is a fulcrum, and it just, you move backwards and forwards, but it's from the shoulder. Correct. Good job. Nice observation, Jean.
Teacher.
Okay, so we put in some little twigs, and we can then come in here with, that's probably not the best brush, but we'll come in here with some shadow color. And shadows are going to be strongest where? Where is the darkest part of the shadow and the lightest part of the shadow? If I put a shadow off of one of these trees, these little stem trees, where's the darkest part of the shadow and the lightest part of the shadow?
Closest to the tree would be the darkest.
Okay, and then it diffuses out as it goes away, right? But for some reason, students will consistently create the shadow the same from the start to the finish, rather than that diffused look out there. And that's why they don't look natural. And in snow, often the shadow can really just, especially on an overcast day like this, it can really get diffused as it goes away from the tree. Right at the very base of the tree, at the start of the tree, you can have a pretty strong shadow in there. So we'll create our shadows going up this way. We'll start our light source here. So but it's not going to be, actually, and those shadows will probably mostly get rid of the end of them, the outside end of them, because with the overcast light, we're not going to have a strong directional shadow. But I'm putting those in there so you can see what we're doing with shadows. All right. So then I can take that, when I talked about a stronger color at the edge, we can always go in order to create that three-dimensional feeling and really put in a stronger shadow towards the edge of where it meets up with the tree. And I didn't use my tool very well, my brush. And then shadows, one of the things that we can do with them is we can use those to create, like in snow, drifts of snow. So that rather than coming in and creating one straight line right across, we can take this line and go up and down and around. You know, you can create so that the shadow is going up and around a drift of snow. Now, that's not necessarily where I want to have a drift of snow, but that's how we can use light and dark, the shadows and all that. We can create ditches, we can create holes, we can create snow drifts, anything that we want by using shadows. It'll help to create the illusion that there's something like that there. So then I can just come back in and diffuse that out very easily. See? And I don't have to worry about those things. Same thing over here. I can come in, kind of, oh, there's a big bristle in there. Something. No, that's just part of the texture. So there's where I can diffuse out the outside edge of those shadows. But often even on an overcast day like that, in order to create a three-dimensional illusion, putting in a really strong contrast at where the tree meets the snow can help to create that three-dimensional effect, rather than getting too wimpy with the values, keeping everything kind of in the middle range of values is what the tendency is. Push the values a bit, even with the shadows of snow and that sort of thing. Now this shadow is all very dark, so we're going to get rid of that. And then you can just kind of pull the brush across all this and diffuse out some of that shadow work in there. Having shadows, it's nice to, I wanted to put in also a directional light source a bit, even if it is a little bit more on the overcast side of things, because shadows are really fun in snow. Coming from a tree like that, they're just fun to look at and they're fun to paint in there. It gives that extra bit of variety to our pieces. So like a rock. Now that one's kind of it's approaching the middle of the piece here, so it's going to demand a lot of attention. But we can create a shadow from a rock like that as well. And then that can help to set up the three-dimensional quality of that rock. And then let's say we want some snow up on top of that rock. So if you go out and you look at rocks or twigs or whatever sticking out of the snow, that's part of what gives them the fun quality with the snow, is you get those lumps that form right at the base of a tree, and the light catches it, if I can get it on there. So then we get the contrast between the lump of snow right here and the shadow going back behind it, and we can help to kind of create a lot of variety in our snow that way. So even when it's in the shadow, we might come in with, now maybe not this light, come in with some snow that is being lifted up because of the tree that's there, and the light catches it differently than the rest of the snow that's being cast into shadow. And even if you don't do it with the lightest kind of snow that we have, you can come in with snow that's still brighter or a different color, different value than the other snow that's there, just to let people know that this is rising up above the other snow that's there. So even with some blue snow instead of the yellow that we had. And I'll get rid of that white. So those are some little ways that we can start to create kind of a fun three-dimensional feel
That really
to
did
things.
make it pop in the 3 dimension.
So let's see. And here, I'm going to carry some of this snow down in to these areas here. I'm just going to kind of carry a little bit of this down in and let's see. So that variety we were talking about with the drifts. And that big patch of lavender was just a little bit too strong, too dominant.
And it also brings the sky down into the sky color.
Let's see. We could always pull some down here, like in the picture there. Pull this up in here. See, a lot of this is just playing with it until you get it kind of to where you think, oh yeah, I like that. All right, and then trees. I have a lot of fun with those too with snow, because you can get those branches off to the sides that catch snow on them. Same thing, let's see, I'm gonna use one of my mongoose hair brushes because, yes. So I can come onto one of these trees here where it's laying over and add some, actually that didn't work out too well at all. And act as if the snow has gotten on top of the tree. And then we can vary up that snow color a bit too, depending on how strongly it's catching directly into the light. And then sometimes the snow tends to come up even on the base of the tree and hugs to it, doesn't want to let it go. So we can create some little branches in here. Let's see, let's get some more. So if we want to create the feeling that there are trees closer and farther back in, we can stop some of the trees at the top of some of this foliage that's in between, and other trees we can pull down through. So I have some trees that go right over, stop back behind, and others that come forward. So then we can, when I start getting out into this area, I haven't put as much because I want to have these more of the light trees that are catching all the sky color. So we'll start to get a feeling of more and more trees back in there. Then I can come in with some of this bright stuff here and just put branches directly with light. That's just not bright, that's not strong enough in the yellow, so it's not standing out. Actually, that was a case of light against light. It's not going to stand out very well. So I'm going to have a lot more success with that if I do the light against dark, right? Like that. So that's where, remember, if you put in something and it doesn't work the way you think, try to think about why that is. So in the case of those, I had light against light. So if I really want to have some of these snow-touched branches stand out, I need to bring them in here where I have some of that backdrop color. And that's why I put that backdrop color in there, so I could have that contrast. And then we can come and create stronger trees this way. All right, let's see. So now I'm gonna, as it goes off into the light, sometimes when you get trees against a light backdrop, they get that silhouette effect where they're very dark and you have the light behind them. But there's also the situation where the light kind of infuses around everything. And so you mostly see light, and that's what I'm doing here is I'm making these trees, I want these to feel more as if the light is kind of coming around them all over. And so I don't want them to be as dark as when I have this over here. And let's see. I have my art class going on, Tony Mora.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Love you.
Love you too.
Bye. They're just calling for my birthday.
Yeah.
I always forget about that.
Oh. Will you be able to get back with her?
Oh yeah. Yep. Tony Mara. We got that name when Christy was pregnant with her. We were watching a John Wayne movie, and they were on a porch and they were looking out, and there was a wind that came through, and the lady commented on the wind, and John Wayne said, "Well, that's Tony Mara. It's Cherokee for north wind." And we thought, okay, yeah, that fits. That works great. So that's where we did that from. All right, so that's not.
I thought they called the wind Mariah.
Some winds. Probably different kinds of winds.
Yeah. Chinook.
Figured out I'm going to have some of those a little bit darker than what I was talking about because my snow isn't going to stand out otherwise. some fun color into some of that too. In Idaho, where I was going to school, they have all these things along the river, even though that wasn't meant to be a river. All these real branchy things, and they're very red. The stems, all these. In fact, I was on a horse when Christy and I first met. I was on a horse. She took me out. She's rodeo, so we're out. She put me on one of the school horses, or I don't know. No, actually, I think it was one of hers. And we're standing there. This is supposed to be a nice, easy horse, and it just suddenly, we were just sitting there talking. We weren't moving, and suddenly the horse just took off, and it was running right for all those things along the river that are about half an inch thick to a quarter inch thick, and they're all over the place, all just very thick, and they stick out in all directions. And all I could think of was, I'm not going to be able to paint again because it's going to take all my eyes out. I just had no idea what was going to. And this horse would not stop. I had its head pulled all the way into its side, and Christy, all she could do was sit there and laugh at me. She thought that was just so funny. It's kind of a blur. Eventually, I managed to get the horse stopped. I have no idea how, and turned. No, I didn't come off the horse, but I probably should have. I'm one of those that, like with water skiing, when the skis go out from under me, I hang on to that stupid rope or handle, and I won't let go. The water's gushing all through my eyes and my mouth, and everyone's yelling, "Let go, you idiot!"
My daughter when she first got her first food, because in my day, all they gave them up to 6 months was milk. And so at 6 months, we let her have a French fry. But it was so hot that she grabbed onto it, wouldn't let it go.
Oh.
Would not let that go.
That is kind of what happens to me, I think. I don't know what on earth that is. It's not a very smart tenacity, but I'm putting in a little bit of like the kind of soft, bushy foliage that you can get from branches when there's a lot of little ones. And I probably should have done that with a bigger brush. In fact, maybe I'll move that out a little bit with that. This way. So that I can come in here with some of those lights that I want to have. You can still have the color of the sky back there. I'll see, just because I'm trying to, and now normally I might have just left that the way it was because that sky was kind of nice back there, but I think it'll be more instructive for you, since this is a demonstration, to see how to get light on things. And so I have to have darker than what the sky was in order to get some of that light, those branches that actually have snow stuck to them. So this will be the easiest way to do that. Okay, and then I'm going to use this round to create.
Could you have left the sky without the tree, or would it have been too heavy on the right side of the painting?
Well, and that was part of the situation too. In the painting, I have that pine tree right there that cuts that off and helps pull the viewer in. But I could probably wipe that off and go back to just my sky more and leave it and be just fine.
Okay, that's what I wondered. I didn't know whether there was too much dark on the one side.
No, I did this mostly just because I thought it might be helpful to, but maybe I should just wipe it off and leave it. It was kind of a restful feeling to it the other way.
That sky, I mean, and all the monochromatic stuff going along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah, I think I'm going to just take that back off. So here's a demonstration in how to start all over again. If it doesn't work, then change it. That's why we're the artists.
Well, it was that That was soothing.
Yeah, it was definitely it gave a rest there with all the activity going on everywhere else. All right, so, I'll hold on to this for a minute and then put it back.
Something to that wagon painting. The weight of the wagon is all on one side. And I've looked at it for a couple weeks now. I need to balance something over here.
Well, maybe just something restful like the sky on the left side of the painting.
Oops. Hopefully I get this back in the same spot so that it looks right on the video. I normally would have it under, but I was trying to keep this so that it's more stable. And I wasn't expecting to push that hard on it. But if I have it out farther, it's better. You can see everything better that way. So, all right. So, easily fixed. Like that. So never be afraid of experimenting and trying things. You can change things again fairly easily. And with oil paint, all you have to do is let it dry. And then you can do it all over again.
Panels, it's a lot easier to wipe off than on a canvas.
And then, yes. Okay, add a little bit more of that blue, the manganese blue color into there to kind of cool it down a bit. And I love that combination with the yellow sky with some of that manganese tint to it. And then just simply come back in with a tree here and there without all the everything taking over. So here we go again with, as you can see, I just picked up a fairly good sized brush and I just let some of the little bristles drag down through there. Okay, and then I also like some of these lavender colors for branches back there, or trees back there too. It's fun to have the colors that we use around play back in different places in the painting as well. And that combination of the yellows and lavenders always works really well. You got the things of nuts over there, all ready for anyone who's hungry. Courtesy of Jean, my birthday present. Okay. I'm gonna break up some of that. So it's not quite such a dramatic all the way down kind of thing. Got to pull it back up a little bit and get a better flow than that.
Would that mean you're going off? The eye would be going off?
It was a pretty dramatic trajectory that way. And maybe a little bit stronger color here. And that is nut. There we go. That'll help. Just going to fill in some of this white that's so stark in here. Okay. And I don't like this little halo here created between one smooth area and one more dry brushed. So kind of integrate those a little bit here and there.
Now, frame-wise, do you think black or do you think silver?
I don't have any, I hate framing. I can't figure that one out. And then with the galleries in different parts of the country, one area likes gold, one likes black. I never know what's what. And then I'll have in one area where they generally like gold, someone will come in and buy a painting and switch it out for a black frame. I have no idea. Black, silver, gold. they kind of go in and out of fashion, and ornate or simple. It's all complicated to me.
I told you that I saw someone with Dan's painting. Beautiful frame on it. They changed it to.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, there you go. Okay, so we've got, looking in the mirror, one thing that this little patch of stuff right there doesn't really make sense as anything, so that's something I'll want to change up. Let's see, otherwise the painting overall has a good flow to it. It has good variety of spaces and structure in it, and it carries around nicely. So a lot of what we do from here is just, at this point, this is where it's very subjective. It depends on how much we want to develop it up. How much detail do we want compared to leaving it more simple and loose and lacking in detail. So I could take a little bit here and there. Let's see. Especially with some of the bits of snow that we can put in here. And sometimes I do like a stark, let's see, I don't want to use that one. I just got that ready for some snow. I like some stark trees, like these little ones that are a little bit stronger against the snow. So I might come in, because what is it about that I like? Almost like in the painting there, that lone tree, small little sprig sitting there by itself. There's something lonely and yet elegant, intimate about it.
And it's got the spotlight.
That's right, it is kind of spotlighted, isn't it?
Patrick always does something like that. Usually it's a weed,
Oh,
just a couple leaves.
that almost made me think that Sammy was here today. She has a toothache that is really bad, so that's why she's not here.
And I did tell
Poor
her
lady.
about Rona, didn't I? She was-
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
No, I don't think she didn't want to get out in the freezing, but I can't remember exactly what she told me now. And she didn't have your number, so.
Well, that's a legitimate reason, really.
Yeah.
It's dangerous out.
Yeah.
It is cold out there today. Although my number's on the website, so anyone can.
Okay, well, she said it, she decided to call me instead.
Oh, okay.
She said she probably felt like she could have gotten it.
So this little tree, when it's against the snow, I did do a mix of lighter and darker in here just for variety and some warmth in here. But then as we come up into this dark area, that's where we can change up and still carry that little tree. Oh, I'm getting too thick. See, I pushed too hard. Carry that little tree up and have some small. But you notice how when we get up into the dark area, then it's the relativity of it is going to mean that those are probably going to be lighter looking rather than when they're against the backdrop of the snow. And we can take that opportunity as well to put some snow in here, like where the two bits of the branches come together, that little crook might catch some snow in it. See? And that's the sort of stroke where you have to have enough paint on your brush that you don't have to work hard at laying it on there. Okay, so that kind of stroke, I get plenty of paint, come over here, grab up a whole bunch of paint right on the tip of my brush, and then be very determined on where you want it. Set it down at like when Julie talked about coming down. Well, in this instance, I want more at the crook of the branches and less as it comes up the little stem or twig of that. So I lay it down first here, pushing in a little bit more, and then pull away as I drag the brush up so that it just lightly lays that paint onto there. And then I don't touch it unless I've messed up and I have to start over again. I don't touch it again. We can do that with the varying degrees in here. And that's where we can get a lot of that little sparkle stuff that happens in snow scenes. Just adding in some bits of snow here and there. Like on this one, we could say that back here is where it's laying, because depending on how the tree is turning and twisting. So if I lay and that is coming away from the light, so actually we'll get that more blue. It's not going to be as warm on the back side of the tree as what it would be when the sun's coming, or the light is hitting here. In this case, I'm going to put something behind that so that you can see better. Wrong way. See, what I'm doing is I'm creating an area where the tree comes down. Those spaces where maybe a branch broke off at one time, a branch started to grow off farther on the other side of it, and it created a little shelf like on the tree. Well, that little shelf back here, if it's on the back side, away from where we say our light source is coming from, then on the back side it's going to be cooler because it's catching more of the ambient cool light that we have overall. And if it's on the front side where the light is directly hitting it, then it's going to be warmer because it's catching more of the sun light that's hitting onto it. Does that make sense? So the back side is going to be cooler, the front side, depending, I mean that's all relative of course, but if we're saying that the snow is on the back side and away from our light source, if our light source is warm, and then it'll be cooler. And you can see I tend to intermix my brushes because oftentimes it doesn't really affect me too much. But, okay, so then maybe I'll just come in and this is where we can just say that either they're just very light twigs of branches or they've got a little light dusting of snow on them.
Is that a little round?
Yep, this is a round. This is a Sabi mongoose hair brush.
Because that's really fine and detailed.
Okay, and those are some of the fun stuff that we can get into up in these areas too if you want. This is where we talked about the subjectivity of it all and how much detail with little branches do we want to have. And that's all up to the discretion of the artist. So we can come in with some of this and some bristles in there. Boy, some of my brushes are just losing them today, aren't they? Look at that, all these.
Are they in the paint or from that brush?
They're from the brushes. Not this brush, but from some of my bristle brushes.
Because it's cold?
No, I think it's just that sometimes my brushes decide that they no longer want to live. I don't know. They just start to give up their...
That's what I meant. Oh, gosh, yes.
Hear about it.
What?
My hair's getting thinner.
Here.
And this is where we can either have fun with it and get some really nice little nuances, or we can overwork the piece until it dies. So we've got to be very careful about that. Just like what happened when I got overzealous in teaching earlier and almost destroyed the painting. by taking away all that sky. I don't want to do the same thing now. Yes.
Where you were overzealous in that brownish thing is on the left. It just seems out like
This
down
guy?
there. No, the big, the big. Keep going.
You go down.
Did it go down?
Mirror. You need to look in the mirror.
Yeah,
Like
look
here?
in the mirror. That,
Right in that area.
the brown, it looks like.
That's-
No, not there.
No? Which area?
Me.
No,
go up.
go up.
Get there.
Right here.
Right there.
Yeah.
Right there. Oh, okay. You're saying that's too much of a,
It just doesn't
Have
look
a-
like anything.
okay.
It almost looks like the sun is going
Mm-hmm, it could be. All right.
all right.
That's the sort of thing then that we can break up with some of our snow color. And we can use that dark color to lay something else against it. Everything is changeable with oil paint. Let's see, but before I go in playing, I need to figure out what I want to do with everything. So actually,
This whole time, have you added any solvent at all?
I did a couple of times with some of my walnut oil, but overall I didn't really need it in this particular painting. I could come and say that this tree is kind of leaning over and add some snow on to that tree as well. And since it's kind of on the back side of the tree, turning away from the light overall, and now I'm just taking off a little bit of that, so it's not too heavy. Then it's going to be more on the cooler side of the snow. Instead of the warm highlight, it's cooler. All right, well, I think we've covered a lot of the basic stuff. Let's see, these rocks are kind of lumpy, aren't they? So let's take some of that. Like with this one, we could add in some highlight. And actually, just come up over the top of that and really get as if the snow's on top of that rock. More. And then we can come back on the back side of a rock and put in some snow that still stands out as if it's against the rock, but more on the shadow side of things. Same thing as what we were doing with trees. On the back side of a rock, it'd be going away from the light. So we could get that shadow even darker than that, as far as the snow back there. Same principle. If the light, just think about where the light is, and then we can figure out what color that snow might be. So this might not create a shadow. It might just be that the snow has bunched up around the rock, and so we have still snow that's standing out from the other snow that's laying down around everything. So it might still be much lighter than the other shadowed snow, but it's still on the shadow side of the rock. It's not on the direct into the light side of the rock. So that's how we can create that feeling of direction with the light. So keeping that in mind all the time will help to know what colors we're putting where, and keep things feeling consistent and more natural that way. All right, what other things should I cover in here just so that you can get an idea of how to do snow scenes? Are there things that you'd like me to change or do different at the moment that might help you to understand things better? Or have we covered enough that you could go and try?
The one big rock. Would it have snow on it?
This one right here? It might. Depends on the shape of the rock. But yeah, I probably wouldn't in the end leave that rock quite so just kind of like a brown lump. That one.
Happy birthday.
That's actually Christy. She has her own particular text sound, and I have no idea how I got that one on there because I couldn't figure it out for anyone else, but so let's see. All right, so let's see. We can change up that rock by adding in some light snow, maybe on the front. And changing up the way the shadows or structure of the rock by changing up the form a little bit with some shadow areas. And then maybe create some little bits of change in the planes of the rock, sort of thing. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic necessarily. Let's see, what can I use? And we could change up some of that rock, just like that. You can change a rock around or anything like that to be almost any kind of structure that you want. I mean, you're the one creating the rocks, so you don't have to leave it as a lump. And if I want it to be warmer, wrong color. Come in and pop some warmth onto the rock, that way. And then maybe carry that snow onto there a little bit. All right, let's see. There. Putting in bits of snow texture and stuff can be fun and create a more three-dimensional quality to it.
That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It was so easy.
Snow is, see, now you know how easy snow is. Just simple, simple.
Next week, I need to bring my 2 snow pictures.
Yes.
Okay, anything else that you want to cover? Things that you don't understand, or you want to just try this out and go from there? And then as you get into it, we can answer more questions. What would you like?
Want to try it?
Okay. We'll call that good for today. Thought I'd come in and do a few more little touch-ups in here. First of all, this tree blends in with the back pretty strongly. So I want to get some color into these trees that'll help to pop them away from that cool background a bit. Add some reds and yellows and warmer colors into there. been a bit timid with this tree that I've been working on so far, so I'm going to definitely punch this up a bit with a lot more interesting color than that, especially to complement those blues, like orange, some oranges or something, and a little bit brighter color. Give it some fire in there. I realized once I started putting that in there, that branch, that I had created a Y, and I don't want a Y in there, so I'm going to break that up and pull one of those branches down a little bit. Make that a more interesting shape in that tree. You notice I'm using a lot of the same colors, pulling from the same piles of color for the rocks, the little bits of grasses that I'm putting in now, the trees, the leaves. I want to keep a simplicity to the piece that helps kind of create a calming atmosphere in it. So I don't want to overcomplicate it with too many different colors and variations in there. I didn't have a chance to videotape the final painting session, but I thought you might want to see how it all turned out. Here you go. Thanks for stopping by. Now get out there and paint your own masterpiece. Oh, And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you're interested in any of my videos, just go to my website at inmanfinearts.com and you can find them all there. Have a great day painting.